All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're talking all about something that's super important to me, and I'm sure to a lot of you guys, navigating global travel as a Black traveler.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a look at some potential challenges you might face in certain countries based on what other travelers have reported and some societal context.
Yep.
Think safety tips, cultural awareness.
Yeah, making sure your trip goes as planned and that you have the best experience possible.
Exactly. And I think that's the key takeaway here. This isn't about fear-mongering.
No.
This is about being informed and empowered.
Absolutely.
To make your travel dreams a reality.
It's about knowledge.
Yes.
Forewarned is forearmed, as they say.
Love it. And we've got a long list of countries to get through today.
We do.
Everything from Russia and China to Argentina and Morocco.
All around the world.
So we are going to try to keep things moving.
Yeah.
But let's jump right in. We'll organize it loosely by region.
Okay. Sounds good.
And I think Europe is a good place to start.
Yeah. Europe is a great place to start.
Because a lot of us have, Europe on the bucket list or have already been.
For sure.
So let's say you're planning that dream trip to Greece, soaking up the sun on those beautiful islands.
Yeah.
Everyone raves about how welcoming the Greek people are.
Hospitable. Right.
But we've heard some reports from Black travelers about experiencing subtle forms of racism.
Yes.
Especially once you venture outside those main tourist zones.
Yes. And those experiences can be really jarring because they're so unexpected.
Right.
Imagine you're at a taverna.
Yeah.
And the server is just ignoring you, favoring other patrons.
Okay.
Or trying to hail a cab, and they're just passing you by for other fares.
So it's not always overt hostility.
No.
But those little things add up.
Yeah, and they can impact your overall experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost like a low-key tension.
Yes.
That you can't quite put your finger on.
Right.
So even in a place like Greece.
It's a reminder that no place is completely immune to these issues.
Right.
And things can get a bit trickier. Yeah. In countries with less developed tourism infrastructure, like Hungary or the Czech Republic.
Okay.
Fantastic places to visit, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But they tend to be less diverse. And sometimes those preconceived notions or stereotypes can surface.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're venturing off the beaten path.
So less diverse and less accustomed to seeing Black travelers.
Could be.
Now, Italy.
Yes.
I've always heard it's super important to distinguish between the North and the South. Almost like two different countries when it comes to cultural norms.
Absolutely.
So break that down for us.
Yeah. So the North, with bustling cities like Milan and Florence, tends to be more diverse and generally speaking more welcoming to Black travelers.
Oh, yeah.
You're more likely to blend in, and people are just accustomed to seeing people from all walks of life.
Gotcha.
The South, however, can be a different story.
Okay.
There have been reports of discrimination, and some of that might stem from the challenges faced by African immigrants in the region.
Gotcha. Some more attention there.
Right.
Okay. Italy noted. Now, what about those Eastern European countries that have become super popular lately?
Yeah.
Like Ukraine and Poland.
Yeah, those are two places.
I imagine a lot of people might not be as aware.
Where Black travelers have reported facing quite a bit of hostility, especially outside of the major cities.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And the language barrier can definitely exacerbate things.
Of course.
Imagine trying to explain yourself.
Right.
Or get help.
When you don't speak the local language.
And you're already facing suspicion or prejudice.
Right.
It can be really stressful.
So in those cases, would you say sticking to the main tourist routes might be a way to minimize that?
It could be a good strategy, yes.
Okay.
At least until you get a better feel for the place.
Right.
You're more comfortable navigating those complexities.
All right, good to know now to round out our European adventure.
Yes.
Let's talk about Germany and France.
Okay.
I feel like those might be considered safer bets, especially in terms of diversity and openness.
Overall, yes, but again, no country is entirely immune to bias.
Right.
In Germany, there have been instances of racial profiling.
Okay.
Although larger cities like Berlin tend to be more inclusive.
Okay.
And in France, the legacy of its colonial past can sometimes color interactions, particularly with people of African descent.
So even in Western Europe, it's good to stay aware of those undercurrents.
Precisely.
Okay. Europe unpacked, where to next?
Let's head east and explore the nuances of Asia.
Asia, here we come first. China.
Okay.
A country that just seems endlessly fascinating.
It is.
What kind of experiences are Black travelers having there?
One thing that stands out from traveler reports is the feeling of being constantly observed or photographed,
Right.
particularly in more rural areas.
Interesting.
Imagine walking down the street and
Yeah.
feeling like everyone is staring at you,
Okay.
and then suddenly someone snaps a photo without even asking.
Oh, wow.
It can be quite jarring.
Yeah, like you're suddenly an exhibit in a museum.
Exactly, and it seems to stem from a lack of familiarity of the Black people rather than outright hostility. There's a curiosity factor at play.
Sure.
But it can definitely feel intrusive
I can see that.
if you're not prepared for it.
So a healthy dose of patience and a sense of humor might be needed.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that in larger cities, you're less likely to encounter this phenomenon.
Okay.
Places like Shanghai and Beijing are much more cosmopolitan and diverse.
Makes sense.
So you're less likely to stand out.
Gotcha. Now, how does that compare to Japan?
Okay.
I always think of Japan as being very polite and respectful.
And it is for the most part, but there are definitely cultural nuances that can lead to misunderstandings or even subtle forms of discrimination,
Okay.
often stemming from a lack of exposure to diversity.
Interesting.
For example, direct eye contact, which is considered polite in many Western cultures,
Right.
can be seen as aggressive or confrontational in Japan.
Okay.
And blowing your nose in public is considered quite rude.
So little things.
They might seem like small things,
Yeah.
but they can make a big difference in how you're perceived.
Being mindful of those cultural differences.
Yes,
Maybe even learning a few basic Japanese phrases could go a long way.
absolutely. Demonstrating respect for the local culture
Yeah.
definitely enhance your experience and make those interactions more positive.
All right. Next stop on our Asian adventure, South Korea.
Okay.
K-pop. Amazing food. But what about the social landscape for Black travelers?
Similar to China, the curiosity factor can come into play here.
Yeah.
Sometimes that curiosity manifests in ways that can feel uncomfortable, like people touching your hair without asking.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine that could get old quick. Or asking very personal questions.
It's a good reminder that what might seem harmless to one person
Right.
can be quite offensive to another.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say learning some basic Korean phrases and being prepared for those kinds of encounters would be helpful?
Definitely, it's all about being aware of those cultural differences and approaching those interactions with understanding and a sense of humor.
Got it. Now we've got 2 more countries to cover in Asia before we move on. Let's touch on India briefly.
Okay.
From what we've gathered, staring, intrusive questions, and even some instances of discrimination have been reported.
Yeah.
How does that vary across the country?
India is a vast and incredibly diverse country, so experiences can vary greatly depending on where you go.
Yep.
Major cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore tend to be more cosmopolitan and welcoming,
Gotcha.
while smaller towns and rural areas might present more challenges.
Yeah.
You're more likely to encounter stares and intrusive questions, and in some cases, you might even experience discrimination based on your race.
So maybe for a first-time visitor, sticking to those urban centers or joining an organized tour might be a good way to dip their toes in the water, so to speak.
It could definitely make the experience smoother and less stressful.
Yep.
And remember, there are incredible resources available online,
Yeah.
like travel blogs and forums,
Right.
where you can connect with other Black travelers who have been to India and get their insights and recommendations.
Love that. All right. And
Yeah.
finally, for Asia, we have Lebanon.
Okay.
What kind of insights did we glean from traveler reports?
Lebanon presents some unique challenges for Black travelers, particularly those of African descent.
Okay.
There have been reports of discrimination and prejudice,
Yeah.
often tied to societal biases against African domestic workers.
Wow.
It's a sensitive issue rooted in complex social dynamics.
It sounds like it's crucial to do your research
Yes,
and maybe even connect with local Black communities in Lebanon
absolutely.
to get a better understanding of those nuances.
Yeah, and remember, travel is all about learning and expanding our horizons.
Right.
Sometimes that means stepping outside of our comfort zones and confronting uncomfortable realities.
Okay. That wraps up our whirlwind tour of Asia. Ready to jump to another continent?
Absolutely. Let's explore the Americas next.
Okay, so we've explored Europe and Asia and some of the, potential challenges that Black travelers might face.
Right.
Now let's head to the Americas
Okay.
and start with Argentina, tango, Patagonia, delicious wine.
Yeah.
What's not to love? But what about the social climate for Black travelers?
Argentina is a country with incredible natural beauty and a vibrant culture.
Yeah.
But it's also a place with a history of limited racial diversity. And that can sometimes lead to Black travelers feeling a bit out of place or encountering microaggressions, even if they're not intentional.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, it's not about overt hostility, but more about a lack of awareness or understanding.
Yeah, like you're trying to enjoy your trip,
right?
But you're constantly feeling like you're being judged or scrutinized.
Exactly, and it can be hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it firsthand.
Right.
You know, for example, imagine you're shopping in a market, and the vendor automatically assumes you don't speak Spanish and starts speaking to you in very broken English, even though you're fluent or you're trying to get a taxi, and the driver seems hesitant to pick you up while readily accepting other fares.
So it's those subtle things that can make you feel like you don't quite belong.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so what advice would you give to Black travelers heading to Argentina? How can they navigate those potential challenges?
Oh, one great tip is to connect with local communities or expat groups.
Yeah.
There are often vibrant Black communities in major cities like Buenos Aires, and they can offer a wealth of information and support.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea.
They can give you tips on which neighborhoods are more welcoming, which businesses are Black-owned, and just generally help you navigate the social landscape.
It's like having a built-in network
of
people who understand what you might be going through.
Yes.
Okay. And don't be afraid to seek out those pockets of inclusivity.
Exactly. Argentina has a rich artistic and cultural scene.
Yeah.
And you'll often find that those spaces are more diverse and open-minded.
Okay, Argentina filed away. Now let's jump up north to Peru. Machu Picchu is on so many people's bucket lists.
Right.
But what about the social climate for Black travelers in Peru? What should they be aware of?
Peru is a country with incredible history and stunning landscapes.
Yeah.
But like Argentina, it has a history of limited racial diversity. And that can sometimes lead to microaggressions or uncomfortable situations for Black travelers.
Okay.
For instance, some travelers have reported shopkeepers assuming they don't speak Spanish well.
Okay.
Or being charged higher prices than other tourists.
It's not always intentional, but it can definitely be frustrating.
Right.
Yeah, and make you feel like you're being treated unfairly.
It's almost like you have to work harder to prove that you're worthy of respect, that you're not a stereotype.
So brushing up on some basic Spanish phrases.
Yes.
Yeah. And doing your research on, which neighborhoods are known to be more diverse.
Absolutely. The more prepared you are, the better equipped you'll be to handle those situations and advocate for yourself.
Great advice. All right, let's switch continents now and head over to Africa and the Middle East.
Okay.
First up, Morocco. I've always wanted to visit Marrakesh.
Yes.
And explore those bustling souks.
It's beautiful.
What nuances should Black travelers be aware of when traveling to Morocco?
Morocco is a country renowned for its hospitality.
Yeah.
And many Black travelers have wonderful experiences there. However, there have been reports of bias.
Okay.
Particularly towards sub-Saharan Africans.
Gotcha.
It's important to be aware of this dynamic.
So even though Morocco has this reputation for being welcoming,
yes,
there are still those underlying tensions and prejudices,
unfortunately,
that can surface.
And it's often tied to complex historical and social factors that are important to understand. For instance, Morocco has a long history of interactions with sub-Saharan Africa, both positive and negative. And those historical legacies can still play a role in contemporary attitudes.
It's a reminder that even in places that seem idyllic, there are often deeper complexities at play.
Exactly.
So what are some strategies for navigating those potential challenges in Morocco?
Sticking to well-established tourist areas is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially if you're feeling apprehensive.
Okay.
There's typically a greater police presence in those areas, and you're more likely to encounter people who are accustomed to interacting with tourists from diverse backgrounds. Joining organized tours can also be a good option, as you'll be with a group.
It's like having a safety net.
Exactly.
Especially when you're in a new place and trying to get your bearings.
And I imagine connecting with local guides can also be beneficial, as they can offer insights into the culture and help you avoid any unintentional faux pas.
Absolutely. Local guides are invaluable resources.
They can provide you with a deeper understanding of the local customs and traditions. And they can also help you avoid any cultural misunderstandings.
Okay, Morocco noted. Next up, Egypt.
Yeah.
The pyramids.
Yeah.
The Sphinx.
Yeah.
Ancient history is just so captivating.
It's amazing.
But what kind of social landscape awaits Black travelers in Egypt? Are there any specific challenges they might face?
Egypt is a fascinating country with a rich cultural heritage.
Yeah.
But it's important to be aware that some Black travelers, particularly those of African descent, have reported facing misconceptions or stereotypes stemming from a lack of understanding of African heritage.
Really?
This can manifest in a number of ways, from vendors trying to inflate prices to people asking intrusive questions about your background or making assumptions about your nationality.
It's like they're seeing you through a very narrow lens.
Exactly.
Based on their own limited understanding of the world.
And it can be frustrating to have to constantly challenge those assumptions and educate people about your identity.
So is it a matter of being prepared for those kinds of encounters?
Yeah.
And having strategies in place?
Both are important.
Okay.
It's helpful to be prepared for those kinds of interactions and to have strategies for dealing with them in a way that feels comfortable for you.
Right.
Sometimes a firm but polite response is all it takes to shut down an inappropriate comment or behavior.
And in terms of locations,
yes,
are there certain areas within Egypt that might be more welcoming?
Larger cities like Cairo and Alexandria tend to be more cosmopolitan and diverse.
Okay.
So you're less likely to encounter those kinds of stereotypes or misconceptions.
Makes sense.
They're also more accustomed to tourists from all over the world, so people are generally more open-minded and welcoming.
Right. The more exposure people have to different cultures and backgrounds, the more likely they are to be accepting and understanding. All right, on to Israel, a country with immense religious and historical significance.
It is.
But also a complex social fabric.
Yes.
What insights did we gather about the experiences of Black travelers in Israel?
Israel is a country with a lot to offer visitors.
Yeah.
But it's important to be aware that Black travelers, particularly those of African descent, have reported experiences of racial profiling and discrimination.
Wow.
This is often linked to the complex social dynamics surrounding African migrants in Israel, who often face prejudice and marginalization.
So it's like there's this underlying tension and distrust that can spill over and impact Black travelers.
And it can be difficult to navigate those situations, especially if you're not familiar with the local context.
So what advice would you give to Black travelers who are planning a trip to Israel? How can they stay safe?
Well, one strategy is to focus on more cosmopolitan areas like Tel Aviv, which tend to be more diverse and open-minded. There's also a large expat community in Tel Aviv, which can provide a sense of support and camaraderie.
It's like finding your tribe. It's people who understand what you're going through and can offer advice and support.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more you research and understand the local context, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those complexities.
Absolutely.
There are great resources available online like travel blogs and forums where Black travelers share their experiences and tips for staying safe and having a positive experience in Israel.
Fantastic advice.
Yeah.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in Africa and the Middle East.
We have.
One more country to go, Saudi Arabia. A unique cultural context.
Definitely.
And for many, a sense of mystery. What should Black travelers keep in mind when planning a trip to Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia is a country deeply rooted in tradition, and respecting those customs is paramount.
Okay.
It's a conservative society, and it's important to dress modestly and be mindful of cultural norms.
Got it.
Black travelers have reported instances of bias or prejudice, often stemming from societal attitudes toward race and ethnicity.
Okay.
It's not as overt or prevalent as in some other countries we've discussed, but it's something to be aware of.
So it's like you need to be extra vigilant and sensitive to the cultural nuances to avoid any unintentional offenses.
Exactly. Do your research, learn about the local customs and traditions, and be respectful of the local people and their way of life.
Right.
Engaging with locals in a respectful and curious manner can go a long way in fostering positive interactions and breaking down stereotypes.
Great advice. So we've explored the Americas, Africa, and the Middle East. Just one more region to cover. Russia. Ready to dive into that?
Absolutely. Russia presents some unique challenges for Black travelers. Okay. So let's unpack those.
All right. So last stop on our global tour, Russia. We've heard some concerning reports from Black travelers about their experiences there.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. What makes Russia particularly challenging?
Well, Russia has a complex history when it comes to racial diversity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Black travelers have reported some serious difficulties, ranging from racial profiling to outright racism.
So it's not just about subtle biases we've talked about in other countries.
Right.
We're talking about more overt
Yes.
and potentially dangerous situations.
While many countries have their issues with subtle racism or unconscious bias,
Right.
Russia seems to have more instances of outright hostility and aggression directed towards Black people.
Wow.
It's not to say that everyone in Russia is racist.
Of course.
Of course. But the risk of encountering these kinds of negative experiences is definitely higher than in many other places.
That's unsettling to hear. It makes you wonder, why is that? Is it a lack of exposure to diversity? Or are there deeper historical and societal factors at play?
It's likely a combination of factors.
Is it?
Russia has a long history of ethnic and racial tensions. And there's a certain level of xenophobia that still exists in some segments of society.
Right.
And while the country has become more diverse in recent years, particularly in major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg,
Right.
there are still many areas where Black people are a rarity.
Yeah.
And that lack of familiarity can breed fear and prejudice.
It's a reminder that travel can be a powerful tool for breaking down stereotypes and building bridges, but it can also expose us to the darker realities of the world.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to Black travelers who are still determined to visit Russia despite these challenges?
Yeah.
How can they stay safe and minimize their risks?
Well, vigilance is key.
Okay.
Be aware of your surroundings and trust your instincts. If you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in a particular situation, remove yourself from it.
Gotcha.
Sticking to well-known tourist areas is always a good idea,
Yeah.
as those areas tend to have a greater police presence and are more accustomed to international visitors.
Okay.
Traveling in groups can also provide a sense of security. Safety in numbers.
Exactly. And if you're feeling particularly apprehensive, consider hiring a local guide
Okay.
who can help you navigate the cultural landscape and avoid any potential trouble spots.
It sounds like preparation is crucial.
Yes.
Doing your research, connecting with other Black travelers who have been to Russia, and having a plan in place can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And remember, there's no shame in adjusting your travel plans based on your comfort level.
Right.
If you're feeling uneasy about a particular destination, don't feel pressured to go there.
Sure.
There are plenty of other incredible places to explore in the world.
Great advice. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the sunny beaches of Greece to the bustling streets of Tokyo to the ancient wonders of Egypt. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and we've only scratched the surface of a very complex topic.
Of course.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought and some practical tips for navigating the world as a Black traveler. Absolutely. Remember, knowledge is power. The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to handle any challenges that come your way and have an amazing travel experience. And who knows, you might even inspire others to step outside their comfort zones and explore the world with open hearts and minds.
I love that, and this deep dive has focused on challenges.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to remember that travel can be an incredible force for good.
Absolutely.
It can help us connect with people from different cultures, break down stereotypes, and build a more inclusive and understanding world.
Beautifully said. So to all our fellow adventurers out there, keep dreaming, keep exploring, and keep learning. The world is waiting. Safe travels.